Okay, thank you, commissioners, staff, and meeting participants. Thank you for joining us this evening for the April 7th, 2021 Monte Sereno Site and Architectural Commission meeting. I'd like to point out a few things to assist commission members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Commissioners, if you could keep your microphones muted until you wish to speak. You have a live mic. For this commission meeting, we're using Zoom to host the meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are two icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues, such as being unable to hear a commissioner speaking. Please use the raise hand if you would like to be recognized and enabled to speak to the commission by the chairperson. Comments in the chat feature will not be part of the public record. For the public to comment under oral communications or on any agenda item, in addition to using the raise hand feature, emails can be submitted to the city planner at cityplanner@cityofmontesereno.org, limited to 350 words, and they will be read into the record. This limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute allowance. Only attendees using the Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participation from a telephone will allow for listening only and does not allow for any feedback. And finally, because we're not all in the same room, all votes for this meeting will be taken by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Do we need to take a roll call to start?
Yes. Commissioner Harrington?
Here.
Commissioner Booker? Commissioner Sharma?
Present.
Commissioner White? Chairperson White?
Present.
Commissioner Zeidler?
Here.
And just to note, I did recognize Commissioner Booker say here, but I think he was muted. So all commissioners are present.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any orders of the day independent of our agenda?
No, all is as presented on the agenda.
And any oral communications to share with the commissioners in advance of our meeting?
Do you see anybody raising hands for oral communications? I don't think so.
All right. This is an opportunity, folks. If you want to speak to anything that's not on the agenda tonight, if you could use the raise hand feature, we'll know to call on you. Again, this is only in relationship to items that are not agendized for tonight. All right, I don't see any hands raised. Very good. Then I will ask all the commissioners if everyone's had an opportunity to review the minutes of our meeting on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. And if there are, is there anyone who's willing to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 17th meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. And Ms. Hamilton, if you could make a roll call for that, we can get through that issue.
Commissioner Zeidler?
Aye.
Commissioner Booker?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharma?
Aye.
Commissioner Harrington?
Aye.
Chairperson White?
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. All right, we're going to move on to our public hearing aspect of the meeting. And the first item is a tree removal request. Ms. Hamilton, if you would introduce that particular topic for us.
I'm just going to note that Commissioner Zeidler is the property owner for this one. So I believe she'll be recusing herself as a commissioner on the item and speaking as an applicant. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so what we have before you is a tree removal request for the property at 15989 Grandview Avenue. The property owner is requesting to remove 2 redwood trees in the rear part of their property, their rear yard. Each tree measures approximately 100 inches in circumference. They are located in a very constrained planting area and have pretty much outgrown the location and can cause a potential hazard with some of the limbs dropped. This property years ago was overplanted relative to the trees with thought of how large they would grow. And, you know, as this is happening, there's a need to remove them and replace either on different parts of the property as this property owner has, or really just work to thin to some extent the trees on the site. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Hamilton?
I'm curious though, how old are those trees? I mean, how long have they been there? Does anybody know?
My guess is, and the property owner could probably have a better sense of when the home was built, but it looks as though it might have been built in the late 70s, early 80s. These were all planted as landscape trees, so they're not, they were not there before the home was built.
Okay.
Yeah, the initial home was built in the 70s, and I think they essentially rebuilt it in the late 90s and added an ADU. And the owner, and then they sold the house, and the gentleman we bought it from landscaped it sometime around 2000. And I think increased the terracing and added some pavers, and you know, I think it was originally planted too tight, and then he also cut some roots to make room for that landscaping. And actually, before we bought the house, one of the redwoods on the property had fallen because there's just so much terracing that's within, you know, 2 feet of a now giant tree.
Yeah, they didn't leave much room, that's for sure.
No.
There's a lot of redwood trees in that neighborhood that were planted as landscape trees, and they're just not appropriate. They're too close to building.
Yeah.
That's the case here.
Nice yard though.
Yeah, beautiful yard.
Thanks.
Allison, is there anything else that you wanted to offer independent of what you already have as the applicant in this one?
Well, I would just say, I would encourage you to look at the photos if you have any doubts to see how tight the placement is between the ADU and the hardscape and the pool. The other thing I would add, the arborist told me verbally, the roots basically have nowhere to go on probably half the tree. And so it's a stability risk in high winds, because usually redwoods, you know, have those shallow, wide roots. And the trees in that spot, there's no spot for them to go horizontally on really like 60%, because it just drops off on one side and then the back side's an ADU. So I'd mentioned that. And then the other thing is, I know typically a tree of this size, we would require replacement, but because the property was overplanted and we've really had to thin trees for safety and such, I just would like to ask the commission to consider not requiring replacement. Where these two trees are, it's only a few feet wide. It's really a spot for maybe a bush, not even a small tree, because of how tight it is. And we have, one of the things I've enjoyed doing is filling in landscape where maybe previous bushes died and such. And we have actually augmented the landscape a bit and planted some shrubs and small trees where they would fit, but I really don't know where we could put any additional trees at this point.
Not even in the front.
The front has, let's see, about 10 redwoods, 1 crepe myrtle, 1 mature willow, 3 Italian cypress we planted, an oak. The front is chock full of trees. I mean, and 3, maples, Japanese maples in the front. And we have a bottle brush that's 6 feet tall in the front. The front, I don't think there is anyone that would look at our front yard and say we need more trees.
No, but I am reluctant to approve removal of trees without a replacement tree. I think that's been traditionally what we have done in this case, but I'm willing to hear your arguments, or I have heard your arguments on why that's not appropriate in this instance, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
One thing I did to hopefully make it a little bit easier is provide this inventory of the trees we have, because I understand since the commission typically requires replacement trees, if you were to consider not requiring a replacement, you'd need to have, a reason to depart from that tendency to require replacement. So I provide this tree inventory. We have 14 redwoods, and these are all mature trees, 14 redwoods, 4 cedars, 2 live oak, 2, very large acacia, 2 pine, 6 maples, etc. And we don't have, the crepe myrtles are not the tiny kind. We have 2 30-foot crepe myrtle and 1 20-foot. So, and then we have, the privacy trees on the fence lines, photini and such. So if you were to consider departing from the replacement tree, tendency, I think there's a really good basis here. And then also in the arborist letter, the arborist says that we have more trees that will outgrow the space allocated for them. So there's, a basis in the arborist letter also.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have questions for Allison on this application? Okay. Anybody here from the public that wishes to speak on this particular application? If you use the raise hand feature, I'll know to call on you. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the meeting and return this back to the disinterested director, or commissioners, I should say. How do we feel about this? I don't see any problem with it. These trees need to go. The only reservation I remotely have is about replacement trees, because I'd like to see us always insist on replacement trees if at all possible. But in looking, I did drive by, and she's absolutely correct at the front of the yard. I did not go into her backyard without her permission, but I appreciate these photos, which show very limited opportunity to place replacement trees as well. But I'm interested in the thoughts of other commissioners before we entertain a motion on it.
Yeah, I've seen most recently on a property that we sold over in East Los Gatos, where there was a redwood just like this that was planted very close to the foundation of another house, and they can cause problems. So this tree, from these pictures, I can see that at least the one next to the ADU is too close. I mean, yeah, there wasn't any planning that went into this. It's obvious. So I would concur with the removal of at least that one. But then the other one, when I look at it, it's at a tilt. It's actually on unstable ground, just as the arborist had said. So I would vote in favor of removal, just from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree from a safety standpoint, looking at the pictures and also reading the arborist report, that these trees are a hazard. They're very close to the building. And based on what Commissioner Zeidler explained from the root standpoint, that, it's also a stability issue. And so I would be in favor of approving removal of the tree. But I'm with Chairperson White in still requesting that we consider if there was a way to put in some replacement for all the trees that are removed. Maybe not redwoods, but maybe there are some other species that would be more appropriate for the amount of space that's available. Maybe not there, but somewhere else on the property.
Thank you.
Did
Go
you want
ahead.
to talk first? I am in agreement that we should allow these trees to be removed for all of the reasons that have already been mentioned. We've done this just a few times in the past where there's a lot of trees on a property where we don't require the one-for-one replacement trees. I'm leaning that way. I feel like she's got a lot of trees in there, and it's going to be difficult for her to find a place for trees to thrive unless she gets very, very small trees. And I feel like she's taken a lot of care to keep her yard nice and have trees and keep them maintained. And I feel like I am okay with her not being required to plant replacement trees.
So just a question then, how, if you were to, from your experience, how often do we make the exception of not requiring the replacement trees?
The times we've made, and Steve, you can speak to this too, but the times that we've made exceptions are when the property has a lot of trees on it like this. A lot of them have been like hillside properties that are heavily forested, or, but I feel like she's got a lot of trees already going on her property, and I don't want to have to see her come back in a few more years where one tree is interfering with the canopy of another and she has to take it out. So it's rare, but we have allowed it before.
No, I concur. It's usually an occasion where there's a property with a lot of number of trees already there, where it's not going to have a significant impact. I've been by the place. She's right. There's no place in the front to really do anything with a tree. And looking at these images of the back, it's possible that one of these redwood tree sites could be replaced with something like a Japanese maple. In fact, I see one in the photo that looks like it's pretty low. But asking much more of the applicant beyond that, I think would be really tough. And maybe we only ask that they replace with one tree, and 24 box, I think, is what the proposed decision includes. No, it doesn't have a number on it. Appropriate size species.
Appropriate size, yeah.
Yeah. So I would be okay with, approving this. I think the findings, I think we're all in agreement that the findings for issuance of a tree removal permit are absolutely there, that the code requires. And the only real decision is whether or not we require a replacement tree or two in this particular instance. And I would support asking them to at least replace with one tree.
And can that be like a dwarf lemon tree if she wants?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. Tree
Yeah,
of any choice.
appropriate size and species. She could, there's no reason to put a tree in there that's going to immediately die. So I would make a motion to approve the memorandum of decision for tree removal, that the findings that the proposed memorandum of decision provide are accurate, and that our decision include the replacement of one tree of appropriate size and species so that it might survive in exchange for the removal of these two redwoods.
Oh, I second it.
All right, Ms. Hamilton, if you could take a roll call for us, please.
Okay, Commissioner Sharma,
Yes.
Commissioner Booker,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Chairperson White.
Yes.
Just to note that motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Zeidler recused. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. All right, the next item on our agenda tonight is a site development permit at 15941 Viewfield Road. And if Ms. Hamilton could introduce this particular application to us, we can begin a discussion.
Thank you. Commissioners and Chairperson White, the project before you is a site development permit for the demolition of an existing two-story home and the construction of a new approximately 5,320 square foot two-story home, including an attached garage and an approximately 3,908 square foot basement. This proposal also includes the removal of 10 significant trees, which include 5 liquid amber trees, 3 oak trees, 1 birch, and 1 willow. Included as part of the plan for replacement of the trees are 11 24-inch sycamore trees, as well as additional landscape improvements. The proposed home is set not too far off where the existing home is, which is probably about 150 feet from the street at its closest point. This lot slopes kind of up from Viewfield so that the proposed home is built into the slope, with the rear of the home being more of single story and the front has the appearance of the 2 stories. The design is more of a contemporary mission style with clay tile roof, wood windows, and stucco finish. And if you drove by the site, you could see the story poles, but again, the visibility of this home from the street is going to be somewhat obscured with the landscaping. However, you will be able to view it down the center driveway. They have the design, has looked to, again, minimize the massing with some articulation of that front facade and the I'll say the lowering of the roof element above the entryway, although you do still see like a more of a grand staircase up to it. So it does have the look of maybe a large entryway, but again, with this, the kind of the slope of this lot, it's a challenge to design something that doesn't have that appearance. At any rate, I do know that the applicant and his architect are present tonight and could answer any questions that you may have relative to their design concept. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. I'll save my questions for the applicant. Does the applicant or their architect want to speak before the commission at this time? Use the raise hand feature and then I'll know.
Chairperson White, can I just ask a quick clarification question?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So, Ms. Hamilton, you said that this permit is also requesting removal of 10 trees, but the application says 13 trees. Can you please clarify which one is it?
I'm actually, when you do a final count of which trees actually need your approval because they're defined as significant, there are some trees that may meet the size, but are identified as unsuitable per our code. So the final count is the 10.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Great question. All right, anything else from Ms. Hamilton, guys, before we speak to the applicant's rep?
I have a quick question. Are sycamores a tree that are favored, like live oaks and such?
A sycamore is a very appropriate tree in this valley.
Okay, everybody got their answers to their questions? Yeah, okay. Mr. Fazekas, thank you so much for waiting patiently. We're happy to hear from you regarding this particular application, and we may have some questions for you as well.
Right, well, thank you, Chairman, Chairman White, or Chairperson White. Yes, I'm Gerald Fazekas. I'm the architect on this project. We have tried to do a more formal look to it with symmetry and the central driveway. And as it turns out, the driveway is required for the fire department turnaround because the house this is such a long, narrow lot that we needed the fire department turnaround to get up to the house. A lot of the trees on the arborist report that were removed were some were structurally diseased, and I'm seeing about 6 of those right now just looking at them. But we have landscaping on all 3 sides and in the front on Viewfield. The ridge is 2 foot lower than the existing house. On the new house is actually lower than the existing houses. The daylight basement reduces the mass and bulk. And we have the horizontal articulation with the deck and the second floor roofs, as well as the vertical as well as the horizontal articulation with the front of the house. We've tried to protect the privacy of the neighbors. These are large lots, and there's a lot of existing vegetation. And I can answer any other questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. My principal question, I think you answered, and that is that the proposed improvements will be actually lower than the existing. Is that correct?
Correct. We're further forward. Staff recommended that we pull it a little bit closer to the street because the existing house was way too far back. And so the existing house is actually sitting in a higher elevation than we are.
And as a result, there's going to be quite a bit of grading necessary, but that's the quid pro quo for bringing the house forward and lowering it. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd rather drop the house than to add a lot of fill and.
Right. Okay, that's good. I like that. Anybody else got questions for the applicant?
Yeah, you said there'll be, landscaping all around. Will there be some larger landscaping in front, or will it be the flowers and grass?
Well, down the driveway, we're proposing the sycamore trees, and those are going to be 24-inch box. We'll see what we can get. We can get 48-inch box as well. We have 2 large oaks already in front of the house on each side of the driveway. And here again, we're looking at doing podocarpus against the left and right side property lines. The right side property line has a few trees, but that's where we're adding most of our trees on towards the right neighbor. The left neighbor, there's a lot of trees there already. And then all of the trees in the backyard are staying. We're not touching the backyard as far as any trees go. Was there something else on that?
You're not proposing any landscape up next to the house. It's all kind of pavement all the way up to the house.
Yeah, I think I think once we get a landscape architect on board, I'd like to be able to work with staff to finalize that front area, because so much of that is for the fire department. I think when we do the landscaping plan, I can add a lot more shrubs closer to the house, and we'd like to work with staff on doing that if we may.
Thank you.
Can I ask regarding the color in the rendering? It looks kind of a, whitish vanilla color, and then the swatch looked quite a bit more yellow, but I think it might have been the printer. Well, you don't know what came off the printer, I suppose, but can you speak to the color?
Yes, I prefer the swatches. The 3D renderer was a bit light on his rendering. I guess some dial that he did, but we prefer the swatch, which is a little bit darker tans.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Fazekas. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. I think I'm going to open the public comment opportunity, unless the owner wanted to speak, which they're not required to, but if somebody else on behalf of the applicant wanted to speak, I wanted to at least give them that opportunity. And seeing none. Okay, that's great. That's fine. So we'll open up the public comment portion of the meeting in relationship to this particular application. If anybody from the public wants to speak to this application, if you'd use the raise hand feature, I'll know to call on you. All right, silent. Oh, wait, there's one. Vita? need you to unmute your mic, I think. Ms. Vita or Vita, you're welcome to speak. If you'll unmute your mic, we can hear you. We cannot hear it. Oh, there we go. Looks like it's unmuted now. Can you hear us? Vita, did you want to speak? Okay. Does anybody else want to speak on this particular application? All right, I see no other hands other than Vita, but I can't hear Vita.
Steve, did you see her comment in the chat?
No, I'm sorry, I did not.
Oh, she just wants to see the design.
We're going to work on pulling those up on the screen from the agenda. Hold on.
Okay. There we go.
I wonder if she'd want to indicate in the chat if there's a specific angle or anything she would like highlighted.
So we're trying to give you the design, Vita. There's a couple of renderings of what it will look like that will probably be helpful to you.
She
and
said side view south, please, or
Okay.
side view S, please.
I think you should also show the color board.
Yeah, I saw
page.
that.
Oh, side views, please.
South is really the back.
Just go the next one up. And
She
then
says, could
yeah,
you show the right side, please?
that's okay. The right side is, whoops.
Yeah, that's the only thing you've got for right side there.
Alternatively, we can put the elevations up.
That's a good idea.
Um,
My kids have noticed on Zoom, sometimes when the connection's not working well, if you turn the video off, the audio improves. I don't know if that would help her at all.
So the elevation on the bottom shows the right side. The windows to the left and the right. This is all 4 sides of the home that's up on the screen now.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Dave. All right, Vita, if you have an additional question.
So do you have the specific page? Oh, thank you.
Okay, that's just from Dave, I think. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Vita? Okay, you're welcome. All right, well. Anybody else from the public that wants to speak on this particular application? All right. I see Vita's hand is still up, but I think you're satisfied now with the images that have been shown to you, and the hand goes down. Thank you. Okay, very good. I don't see anybody else that wants to talk about this, so I'm going to close the public comment aspect of the meeting and circle back to the commission for comments, concerns, and consideration of this application. Anybody want to start?
I can start. Oh, go ahead.
There.
My concern is, first of all, landscaping. I feel like it's very stark up to the building, and on a new home like this, I would expect to see a more developed landscape plan. There's a lot of pavement right up to the house. It'd be nice to see it softened with landscape. It's a neighborhood that has a lot of large trees and landscaping to soften the massiveness of the homes, and it would be nice to see something up closer. Again, I agree with, was it Allison that said that the palette, the color storyboard looks very different from the rendering. That's all I have to say, really.
Thank you, Heather. Allison?
I would just say additionally, I think it's really nice how it's sort of a split level with the daylight basement and follows the, kind of levels out the contour of the land. I think that's really nicely done. And then any other comments I had previously, and it will be obviously a nice upgrade to the lot because the existing home was older.
Pallavi or Patrick?
Go ahead, Pallavi. Sorry.
Thank you, Patrick. So I agree with Commissioner Zeidler. I think the design is really beautiful and it really looks very nice in the renderings. My one question, and I don't know, maybe this is where I want to defer a little bit to the experience of Chairperson White and Commissioner Heather. Like, I can't get a sense from the application on how the neighbors feel about this, because in the past we've always seen the notes from the neighbor sign where they're either in agreement or disagreement or whatever about the project, and also nobody's actually turned up at these meetings, so I just don't have a sense of how the neighbors feel about this project. So I'd just like to get some guidance here.
So everybody got notice of the application, including all of the neighbors, and had an opportunity to review the plans either in the office on site or on the agenda. I think now our website now actually hosts the complete set of plans that we saw. So the opportunity was there for those neighbors. We can bring a horse to water, we can't make them drink. So you may interpret by their silence nothing, or you may interpret by their silence approval. But there's nothing to consider by way of an objection tonight, short of somebody speaking in the public comment, and we didn't have anybody.
Okay, thank you.
This is City Planner Hamilton. We did send out 30 notices. to property owners and residents if the property owner lives off-site. I have not heard any response to those notices. And actually the story polls on this site have been up for a couple months. So again, I can just say factually, we have not gotten any comment relative to the noticing and story polls.
Thank you. That really helps. Thank you for the clarification.
And my only question would be in terms of, I mean, I'm looking at the maps and I've looked at this beforehand and I can't really tell from the schematics or the drawings where the neighbors' lots begin and end. And so my only concern would be in conjunction with that is the hardscape of the current drawings, like Heather pointed out, and the drainage, you know, that would need to be put in and how that would be, again, and I know we're not here to talk about, you know, the irrigation plan or anything like that, but just overall, that would be my concern on those two things.
When this does come in, all properties need to deal with their runoff on their own property. So no runoff generated from this new home development will be allowed to flow to the adjacent properties.
Okay.
How does the breadth of the new home compare with the breadth of the old home, like the width of the front? Is it similar?
It looks similar, but it's at an.
Yes.
Yeah, if you look at sheet A1, you can see a dotted outline of the existing home, which is set at an angle. And it pretty much spans the same setbacks, but because it's at an angle. So it's, I think, as wide as the proposed home is as wide. It's just set perpendicular to the side property lines as opposed to an angle.
So I'm very pleased with the lowering of the height because I think if all of it, you know, those of us that went out there, I'm sure everybody did, the existing structure is very, very tall. And I'm glad that this is moving forward and being reduced. I very much appreciate that. I do have a question for Ms. Hamilton, and I think it's the one that we're all thinking in the back of our minds, and that is whether approval could be conditioned on submission of a landscape plan that's going to soften the front of this place, because without it, it's a bunch of hardscape and stucco and nothing else. And the renderings look great, but I'd like to see more landscaping much closer to the home, and I think the architect is on board with doing something like that. But I question whether or not we can actually condition our approval on submission of a landscape plan that reflects that.
You can include a condition to expand the landscaping, to have some possibly planter areas closer to the home, as long as they don't impede the use of the fire truck turnaround.
Right.
He does have a driveway. He's got, you know, the stairs, you know, maybe there's some opportunities in front of the daylight area, the daylighted area. Otherwise, again, you've got a driveway and you've got the staircase. So I think most of your opportunity to put additional landscaping in would be on that right side with maybe some planter areas and whatnot.
Or before the driveway, yeah.
Well, again, a fire truck is going to need to pull onto this site because the home is more than 150 feet back from the street. So that's why they have to have that large area in front of the house to turn that fire truck around. So you can't have anything there that's going to impede that turnaround. So you can condition that additional landscaping be included at the front of the home, understanding that the fire truck turnaround needs to be kept clear and free.
How do the other commissioners feel about it?
You could add some vegetation on, on the sides of the staircase. If the staircase were a foot narrower, you could have some sort of planter, something on either side of the entry. Or that, the second floor, kind of the patio that comes out, there's that sheer wall down the left. There could be some, you don't want to put plants right against the structure for fire safety. So on the one hand, it looks nice to have vegetation near a house, but the contrary view is you're increasing fire risk. So.
I
Yeah,
think
I'd
on,
like to
on
bring
each side of the house itself, the structure itself, where there are those 3 columns with lamps on top, there's something that might be able, that could be done there with perhaps boxes, ornate boxes of some sort, to replace those, and maybe, have some greenery in there, to fill it in a little bit.
Yeah, I think if you include just that basic condition, then when this comes in for a building permit, we can work with the applicant to enhance the landscaping adjacent to the new construction with, the types of suggestions that we're hearing tonight, but not necessarily, definitive to what we've been talking about. I think we both have, the applicant has an understanding. And again, I think there are several viable options available to include some greenery at the home side of that fire truck turnaround.
Anybody else with some final comments on this before we entertain a motion? Very good. I think the findings that are in the memorandum of decision that we've received, A through 2Cs, we got to turn one of those Cs into a D. In item 4 can be made, as well as the tree removal permit findings that would need to be made. And in this instance, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to have replacement trees for those that are going to be removed. And so I think the memorandum of decision for site development permit, we can make those findings, and I would move that we adopt a motion that we have made such findings conditioned upon the applicant submitting a landscape plan addressing the concerns that have been articulated tonight. And of course, the standard conditions that are attached to the memorandum of decision. So that would be my motion.
And then with that plan that gets submitted, City Planner Hamilton would review and approve the enhanced landscaping, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to second that motion.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Ms. Hamilton, if you could do a roll call, then that would be great.
Commissioner Harrington,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharma,
Yes.
Commissioner Zeidler,
Aye.
Commissioner Booker,
Yes.
Chairperson White.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
All right. Good luck to the applicant and their architect. Thank you guys for your time tonight. All right. That leaves us with one last item tonight, and that is a zoning amendment in relationship to fencing. Item 3 on our agenda tonight. Ms. Hamilton, when you have an opportunity, if you could introduce that subject for us, we'll get started on that. Please.
Thank you. What's before you tonight is a proposal to amend the city's fence height regulations. The this issue has come before the commission a couple times. This time it comes before the commission as a result of a council's ad hoc committee who worked to put this proposal together. The one thing that I thought might be helpful was in the staff report, there is a kind of a little table, which I think pretty accurately presents what the existing regulations are and what the current proposal is. I'm available for any questions. I know Council Member Mekachuk is here as one of the members of the ad hoc committee to explain their proposal and also, you know, how they came to decide on this. So with that, maybe it's appropriate to have Councilmember Mekachuk speak, and then we'd both be available for questions.
Mr. Mekachuk, did you want to speak?
Can you hear me?
You can. Welcome.
Thank you. The background on the ad hoc committee is that Mayor Leuthold, when he put the ad hoc committee together, he wanted to take two people from each end of the spectrum. So that was myself on it as an advocate of increasing the fence height, and Councilmember Lawler, who was receptive to that, but she had reservations. So what happened was we as the ad hoc committee ended up going on a walk through the eastern part of Monte Sereno from Blanchard all the way up through Wimberley Way to Eaton and around there, La Rinconada, and then back through down Caven and Robin Ann Lane to essentially to Vineland and Winchester, and then we concluded at the corner of Winchester and Blanchard. And on the way, I had a measuring tape with me, and we were looking at fences. And I pulled the measuring tape out as we went by different fences, and we were measuring them and looking at them. And we found a number that were not in compliance, but we were talking about what the solutions could be. And Councilmember Lawler was very concerned that she thought that if you had a 6-foot fence that was at the extreme was closed, and then you had a 1-foot lattice on top, that would be acceptable to her. And I agreed with that, and anything, it could go up to 8 feet, but that would require a building permit as required by the building code for California, and it would require site and architecture approval. And any fence over 7 feet, even if it had a foot of lattice, would require review by the Site and Architectural Commission, and also a building permit. And we had agreed to that and presented that to City Council, and it was a 5-0 vote in favor of that, subject to sending it to the city attorney to create the ordinance, reviewed by Ms. Hamilton, and then going to the Site and Architectural Commission for their approval as a recommending body to either recommend its adoption or to recommend against its adoption. Chair White, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much, Councilmember Mekachuk. I appreciate the efforts that you and Ms. Lawler went to. I hope Dipsy and Daisy were along the walk with you. Does anybody have any questions for Councilmember Meckenchuk?
I do, and I'm just curious. I mean, how did this come to be in terms of a focal point and a topic for, consideration and change? I don't know that I got the answer to that. That's why I'm asking. Was there a specific incident of some sort that took place?
Yes, and I have been always wanted to be proud of Monte Sereno, and I moved here in 1997, and I absolutely love Monte Sereno. We're the size of a postage stamp, but I think that we're a great community. And one of the things that has caused a problem for years, and I'm going to dig into some ugly history, but you asked the question, so I'll answer it. Fence heights have always been a problem in Monte Sereno, and at around the year 2000, there was an incident with two neighbors that were very close to City Hall, and one of the people were it was the what's known as the Paget lawsuit, and it started with a fence that was too high, it was too tall, and things got moved, and it turned into a very ugly lawsuit, and it caused resignation among people at City Hall employees, and in fact, one of the council members had to resign, two of the council members, because of their fences, and it's been an issue. And I thought it'd be a good idea to fix that for once and for all. And we tried to amend the fence height regulation, but it failed for a 2-1 vote, and there's a story behind that I won't go into, but essentially it went from a 2-1 vote to a 5-0 vote. So what we'd like to do is change the fence height regulations. Some of the other dynamics over the past couple of years have been the ability to put in an ADU very close to a lot line and with a 6-foot fence, that creates a problem with privacy. And you can say, well, no, we'll plant some vegetation. Well, vegetation has two issues. One, it takes time to grow. The second thing is that if you're on a lot line, or as close to the lot line as the setback allows, there are people that don't want to put any vegetation in that 4-foot area because they're concerned with fires. And just like you heard earlier tonight, there's a concern over fires. So having a taller fence gives you that ability for more privacy to address ADUs and other things, and as well against certain of the major roads in our community, such as Winchester. There's a lot of beach traffic now. There's noise that we didn't have before, and it's very difficult to mitigate that, to reduce that. I think that the commission heard from a property on the corner of Blanchard and Winchester where there's an existing 9-foot masonry wall fence. And when you go through the city of Monte Sereno, there's a lot of houses that are not in compliance. So it's kind of bringing us into 2021. And I mentioned the litigation a few minutes ago. It's astounding that litigation started in the year 2000, and we're still incurring legal fees to February of 2021 for that litigation. So I didn't really want to bring that up, but it is what it is, I guess.
No, well, now that you have, I vaguely remember the incident. So, but it's been a while. But I appreciate that.
Ask a question.
Please.
Appropriate. Councilmember Mekachuk, do you know what's gone in in Los Gatos in recent years related to fencing? Because I have family there and I feel like they've moved to lower fence heights to protect wildlife. And I wonder if there's a possibility, if part of the concern is to decrease litigation and such, I wonder if we could, on the one hand, maybe grandfather in some existing taller fences, but not universally allow for taller fences if we have a similar concern about wildlife?
So fences are a very difficult issue in Los Gatos, and our city manager, Leonardis, he was actually on council in Los Gatos when they were dealing with that, and it took them over 18 months, and they ended up at the same place that they started, which was rather than to identify and I use the word algorithm, or a set of requirements that if you say, if you're in this hillside, if you're in this, you have a property this size, etc., then you're allowed a fence of, X height. So they tried to do that, and at the end of their decision making, they concluded that they would leave the discretion to the community director of community planning, who's Joel Paulson. And I met with Joel and spoke with him and wrote a memo to council on what his findings were. And the essence of it is that they don't have very many applications for taller fences, and he reviews them on a case-by-case basis. And I think that the number was less than 10 a year. So it's not like there's a huge flood of these. And they wanted to deal with the wildlife on the hillside, but at the end of their deliberations, after more than a year, they concluded that it would be better to deal with it on an item-by-item basis.
Thank you for that background.
So for the benefit of the other commissioners, this was before us back when Councilmember Mekachuk was on our site and architecture committee. And we did prepare something, and consistent with what Mr. Mekachuk previously advised, there was something that went back to the city council and apparently wasn't as successful as we had hoped. But there is some history here, and I'm curious whether, Mr. Jeans is with us tonight in the audience, and we'll obviously hear from Mr. Jeans in a moment. But I'm curious whether Mr. Jeans's email of April 2 has been shared with Mr. Mekachuk, and whether he has any concerns about some of the proposed amendments suggested by Mr. Jeans. Have you seen that at all, Brian?
Yes,
I forwarded it to both Councilmember Mekachuk and Lawler.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton.
I did not correspond with Councilmember Lawler on that, but I did review it and the email. And in fact, I was at City Hall yesterday, and I happened to meet Mr. Jeans and had a brief conversation with him in the parking lot, and he outlined what his concerns were. And I'm sure he will speak to those, but I would concur with his observations.
So then you wouldn't have, I think his two suggested recommendations, and we'll get into these, sorry, Mr. Jeans, in a moment, we'll give you an opportunity, relative to percentage of slope and high side of the grade to measure the fence are no-brainers. But I am curious about your thoughts on an open design. So Mr. Jeans suggests that a fence not only be just simply a wood fence, but also an open design fence be the subject of this particular amendment to our code. Are you supportive of that as well, Mr. Mekachuk?
So as I understand his request is if the entire fence is open versus closed for 6 feet and then open at the top, if you will, with a lattice, that provides basically some help in the hillside, and it provides a demarcation of properties. So I would agree with that. You know, building a fence is not cheap. They are expensive, and if you build, basically we don't have R18 houses in the hillside. There are R144s. And when you deal with the cost per linear foot, it starts to get pretty big, pretty significant. Versus if you're in an R18 zone along Winchester, your lot isn't that big, so it's affordable to build a large fence. But on the hillsides, it's not affordable.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions for Council Member Mekachuk? Thank you, Mr. Mekachuk, very, very much. I will here now give Mr. Jeans an opportunity to speak to his email that I've been talking about without him. Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Jeans.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting subject. It's almost better left unsaid, but I think we, seeing as we're addressing it. The open fence basically is so you can put a deer fence around your property. Deer fence needs to be 7 feet tall, or the Monte Sereno deer jump over it. So I don't see a benefit of allowing a 7-foot fence that is solid with an open top and disallowing an open looking deer fence, which you virtually do not see. So that was the whole point of 10.6.130C1. So that was my reasoning on that one. And just following on the comment there, the cost of fencing, it's about $60 a foot for a 6-foot fence, $70 for a 7-foot fence, and $80 a foot for an 8-foot fence. So that's approximately the going rate at the moment, with the price of material going up rapidly. The other point that I mentioned in my email, 10.6.130D5F, I'm concerned that if you're looking at the slope adjacent to the fence, what does adjacent to the fence mean? And what if part of the property has slope and part doesn't? Does that mean the fence has to go up and down 8 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet? So I thought a way of solving that, if you have a section of fence where there is a portion of your property that slopes more than 10%, then just look and say, if that portion of the property is at least 50% of the fence line, then maybe that should be a way of looking at it, so you're not forced to chop and change the fence height. So that was just, I guess, a technicality. And then I didn't quite like the way the height of a fence was determined in 10.6.130E. If you can imagine, many fences on property lines have a difference in height of grade, one side of the fence and the other. And the traditional way of measuring a fence is from the lowest point of the fence on the highest grade side. So if there's a retaining wall with a bit of a fence on the top, if you've got 4 feet of retaining wall, you don't want only to be allowed a 2-foot fence. If you're measuring from the bottom, according to this, from the lowest point to the tallest point, including post lattices and other features, then you need to clarify that it should be measured from the highest grade side of the fence. So that was one thing. And another thought that came to me after I sent that email to Jeannie and asked it to be sent on to you is that what happens when a fence is stepping down a hill, as many fences do in the hillier portions of Monte Sereno. And I think you might want to consider something that says that the height of a fence then should be measured at the midpoint of any panel. So if it's stepping down a hill, it might be 5'6" at the short end and 6'6" at the taller end, but that would be considered as a 6-foot fence as it steps down panel by panel by panel. So that was another thought that came up, because I don't want someone coming out with a tape measure and saying, well, on the tall end of the fence stepping down a hill, you're 7'3" out, even though you're only, 5'9" on the other end of the fence. So those were just thoughts that I had when I read it. I think the idea of trying to codify it is good, but fraught with issues. And we will only see how this turns out over the next few years if it is approved. I am certainly in favor of increasing the height of a fence above 6 feet to a 7-foot by right, with various rules and regulations. And if you've chosen to make the top 1-foot lattice, so be it. So those are my comments. If anyone has questions on any one of them, I will answer questions as to clarification, but they were really just thoughts as to what I think you might change this to before you enact it.
And we're very appreciative of your input. Thank you, Mr. Jeans.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jeans before we close the public comment portion? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Thank you, Mr. Jeans. Thank you, Councilmember Mekachuk. I have a question for Ms. Hamilton. And maybe a comment before that. So to other commissioners, this was before us. I don't know how long ago, Heather. It was a year
Been a
ago.
while. Yeah. Jeannie could probably tell us.
And I was the only guy that voted against it, what we did that night, because it was so convoluted and confusing. I couldn't imagine anybody understanding it after we went through it. There were so many exceptions that it became impossible to follow from my perspective. And obviously the other commissioners felt otherwise. They voted for it, or at least asked that it be considered by the council. I think what Councilmember Mekachuk and Councilmember Lawler have put together is much simpler than what we were looking at a couple of years ago, and I commend them for that, and I support what they have done. My only question is, and I think I would encourage the city council to consider this, but I would also ask the city council to ask the question, how often is this really a problem? Ms. Hamilton, how many times have we considered a fence permit in the last 5 years, say? Just an estimate.
Well, if you're asking me how many times has somebody opted to go before the site and architecture under the current provisions to increase the fence height in the front or side corner from 3 to 6, I would say 3 to 4 times.
Yeah.
And they've predominantly been associated with corner lots, stuff like that. So the bulk of the fencing is all done as of right.
And I think we just approved one on Dave's on the side just not so long ago. So I guess my point in asking Ms. Hamilton that is, I think it's rare that we have this. So my thoughts are, I support what's been drafted here. I think they've done an excellent job streamlining it and making it much simpler. And I would, recommend that the council review this. My only caveat to that would be to ask, is it necessary? Because we just don't get it with such frequency that it's really averting many more applications before the Site and Architecture Committee by having this statute. I guess that's my thought. All right, with that, I'll be quiet and listen to you guys.
I have one question. If part of what we're doing is, clarifying to avoid litigation and that kind of thing, it says effective date, it shall take effect 30 days after the date of its passage. Does it apply retroactively, and how do we handle that in our code? So if someone brings up a dispute for an existing fence that they think is too tall, what happens?
I can answer that. The current regulations for fence height and I'm maybe stepping out of line here, but this proposal isn't being put forth to avoid future litigation. It's being put forth to just straight out amend the fence height regulations. And like any other ordinance, as soon as these regulations go into effect, that's what goes into effect. If there are any disputes relative to fence height, they'll be looked at with whatever is in effect at the time. So let's say you have a fence right now that's 7 feet in height and it's in violation, but nobody's brought it to our attention. If once this ordinance is adopted, and let's say that 7-foot fence complies with what's been adopted, it now is legal. So there's no there's no grandfathering of any illegal fences that wouldn't otherwise comply with what's in effect at the time that we're looking at things. But if something was maybe out of compliance now, and with the new ordinance, it suddenly comes into compliance, great. We can't retroactively so, but you were out of compliance then, so whatever. It's just, that's just the way ordinances work. So in the case of fences, because there's no real building code or anything like that, unless the violation was that they built an 8-foot fence. Now they would have to come in through, get the approval through site and architecture, and then get a building permit. But 7-foot fences don't require building permits. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I guess that's an issue with every part of the code, right? So we should handle it here like it'd be handled anywhere else, and you spoke to that.
Yeah.
Anybody else have comments?
The only thing I would say is, I read the drafted proposal, and I spent some time trying to understand it. So, Chairperson White, you had the comparison with the previous time, and you said that this is much easier to understand, but I didn't really have that, and I tried to do my own research and try to understand it. To me, it still seems really complicated and also really difficult to enforce. And I kind of agree with you, right? Like, is this really a problem that we need to, have all of these different, sort of provisions put in place? It just seems like maybe we're overcorrecting something that doesn't really need that much correction. So that's just my thought.
Thank you. Ms. Harrington, anything?
I mean, my comment, I brought this up before. To me, the difference between 6 feet plus a lattice and a 7-foot solid fence is, I just feel like we're locking ourselves into a certain style of fence. And that if we're gonna go to 7 feet, I don't think there should be the constraint of it being lattice. But I also kind of agree with both of you that do we really need to go there with it? Is there really that much of a problem?
Does anybody have any objection to the suggestions made by Mr. Jeans?
I thought Mr. Jeans had good clarifying comments that make it easier to interpret the code.
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me, an open design, I completely understand the deer fence. That makes complete sense to me, but a big wrought iron fence could also qualify. And that may look more like a prison than a fence.
Agreed.
So, you know, if we want to add, if we want to amend it to include deer fencing, I would be okay with that. But a big cyclone fence like somebody has on near my home, sorry, I was going to name them out, or a big wrought iron fence that looks like, you know, the outside of a prison, I would not be supportive of that type of construction.
I agree.
So I guess if we had to make a motion, my motion would be to recommend that the city council introduce and hold a first reading of this ordinance after consideration of the amendments proposed by Mr. Jeans, and whether there's really a problem warranting such an ordinance.
I second it.
I would probably take it a step further. I'm sorry to jump in like this,
Go
but
for it.
No, go.
I see the problem with this this cutoff date of August 19th, 1977 being a problem at some point in time as well. And not the ability to not grandfather in certain fences that have already been built. I just see that as a huge liability. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, but I think that it could cause problems. I don't know, Jeannie, you would have probably a better sense of that than I do because you've done this, but you know, for them to walk through the neighborhood and to have a measuring tape with them to see so many of them out of compliance, so many of the fences out of compliance, it just kind of seems like, okay, there's a possibility or potential for a lot of activity that can be avoided somehow.
Just that August 1977, that's very common, you know, as cities go through and amend their ordinances. I can't speak to why that date made it in there, but there's some significance probably relative to when maybe they first adopted a fence ordinance. So whether there are any fences that still exist that were constructed at that time, who knows? But that's why I think that date is continued to be carried through any ordinance that is proposed. I would just question in the motion, if you're going to recommend that they introduce and hold a hearing for it as proposed, but then are saying, is there really an issue? Which way are you going on this? Because in essence, if you're supportive of the ordinance, then that's where the recommendation to introduce and hold a public hearing, you know, as proposed with the comments per such and such, or you don't feel there's an issue that warrants them to introduce an ordinance and hold a public hearing.
Well, that is a little
There's
bit.
my confusion in the
No,
emotion.
my emotion was purposely ambiguous because
Yeah.
the city council perceives a need for this. They formed an ad hoc committee. I am not going to.
Well, you're an independent body. So I encourage the Site and Architectural Commission to, you know, feel comfortable in that capacity.
Well, I'm going to defer to the city council who perceives a need for this to exist. Otherwise, they wouldn't have formed the ad hoc committee. And for that reason, I would support a reading, but encourage the council to actually demonstrate a need for this. They must know better than I. That's my only reservation at all in this, because this is so much better than what we were looking at 2 years ago. That I think it's a real strong improvement. And I think Councilmember Mekachuk and Councilmember Lawler have done a great job, but and that's it. Those are my comments. And I like what Mr. Jean suggests. I am a little worried about the open design.
On not wanting a cyclone fence, I mean, you could say what types of fence, open fences are allowed. You could describe them certainly.
Yeah, if right now, with the exception in the proposal that the 7 feet that's solid with the foot of lattice, there's no other distinction on materials used in fencing. If you start to go down that path, you're going to really need to start detailing, because deer fencing, open fencing, cyclone fencing, cyclone with black coating, stuff like that, there's lots of that exists. And should you start to go down the path of eliminating some of those, then you will be creating a lot of legal non-conforming situations, which will need to be tracked. And it's always very hard to track it with fencing.
That's a good reason not to do it.
Well, let me ask this. Well, I'll make the motion, and then we can vote, and you guys we can establish where we're going with this. I move that we go ahead and recommend that the city council hold a first reading of the ordinance as drafted before us tonight. And that the council consider the proposed amendments by Mr. Jeans in conjunction with that.
I'll second that motion.
So
Right.
if I understand what you're saying, Chairperson White, are we saying that as a commission, then we're okay with the ordinance, or are you saying that we're still reserving the right to talk about this later, but we're sending this back to the council?
No, we're recommending that the city council go ahead and have a reading of this proposed amendment to the code with consideration of the comments made by Mr. Jeans. So we're effectively endorsing this.
Okay.
I feel like they put a lot of work into it, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they did that for a good reason.
Right. I as I mentioned before, I don't see the need. We just don't get very many fence requests before us, so I don't know why that's an issue. But I defer to the city council on this, and that's why I'm going to support a reading. All right, if there's no further comments or deliberation on this, then we'll go ahead and have a roll call, Ms. Hamilton.
Commissioner Booker,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington,
Yes.
Commissioner Sharma,
No.
Commissioner Zeidler,
Yes.
Chairperson White.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 4-1.
All right, great. Anything else, council members, before we adjourn for the evening? Or commissioners, excuse me? Seeing nothing, all right. I adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Councilmember Mr. Jeans.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.